And that was the first book of yours I read, and I really loved it. Tell us a little bit about the background there.
It's a story about a couple of competing anatomists, or originally a sort of master anatomist and his apprentice. Once again, loosely based on my family history. It's good to have a father who keeps track of your family history, because it's, I'm sure we've all got skeletons in our closets going back a couple of generations, or not even so far. And in this case, there was a 18th century doctor in the family, so it set me off along those lines. And it's a story that's also concerns the close relationship between the anatomists of the day and the grave robbers of the day, and this sort of crossover between both sides of society, because there was still a law in existence at the time in England that I think there were 8 bodies that were allowed to be dissected by the scientific community every year to teach a whole nation the art of anatomy. Obviously that people were a little more impatient than that, and therefore this separate trade sprang up to satisfy that particular lust. And this is a story of men with very, very different ideas about the ways body worked. This was a time of great confusion still. You're on the cusp of all this empirical knowledge winning through, that really the best thing to do is slow down and let's take things step by step of what we can prove, which is something we now take for granted. But in those days, there were wild experiments of people trying to leap straight from A to Z without any of the steps in between, including, best way to cure people would be to transfuse them with everything from sheep's blood to sheep's milk to, you name it, they tried it. And of course, there are a tremendous amount of people suffering these experiments, and this lies at the heart of the book, not to give too much away. But
well, was this a book? I'm trying to remember. Did you have a surgical? I may be confusing it with another book set in that area. Was there some surgery in this book to do with kidney stones?
Oh yes, there was.
Aha! I thought I remembered that because I thought I remembered there was a particularly great scene when your guy agrees to do one of his. He was kind of renowned, wasn't he, for being able to remove the stone in a flick?
Yeah, the reason he lives in the wonderful way that he does in this book, The Master Anatomist, is because no one has come up with his new way of extracting kidney stones, which was based on a real doctor in the early 18th century in London, who instead of vertical cut started going for a horizontal cut. This was a tremendously painful operation where men would be put in stirrups and have four men holding them down, and obviously no anesthetics to help you. Not a lot of people chose to suffer from this. There's nothing more painful than kidney stones, but except maybe removing them in the 18th century. So yeah, that was definitely an interesting scene for me as well.
I thought I remembered that the essence of his technique was speed, because it was so unbelievably painful. He had devised a system where, it was literally seconds where he could, make the cut and flick the stone and so that the trauma was not as terrible and therefore as life-threatening for the patient.
Yeah, no, that was the essence, but it was also the angle of the cut. And then, of course, in those days, recovery was, there was a quote back in the old days saying that a young doctor would kill you, but an old doctor would let you die. And their techniques for recuperation were just as drastic and terrible. You'd be shut up in a room. They thought any kind of air would be bad for you. The room was plugged even down to the keyhole. Things really hadn't changed since the days of the anatomist Galen back in ancient Greece, and there had been really very little progress in a full 1,000 years. From then on, things move at an absolute rate of knots. But
right.
This is that interesting little cusp.
Well, there's always sepsis too. Because the cleanliness and all the rest was so poorly understood. I can't remember if your guy was did he pour alcohol over his instruments, or did he just carry right
nothing.
on?
Yeah, he was just leaping straight in there.
So there was also, if I remember, a tortured romance in this book.
Yep. We've got nothing against tortured romances. Yeah, in this case, unfortunately, young lady in question is also the sort of the goal of the book is to see which of these two competing figures, father and suitor, can cure her, and they have very different methods that they'd like to try. I'm not sure if I really want to give away the ending.
No, you don't need to do that, just in case we can manage to get it back again. But, or is it another book that's still in print in the UK?
No, that's still in print over here as well.
It still is?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm really happy to hear that, since I'm extremely fond of it. And I obviously didn't do my homework, or I would have gone and looked it up to make sure that it was. It was one of our book club selections, if I remember, for The Poison Pen when it came out, because I liked it so much. Yeah, I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I also think, because, as you say, the medical knowledge was pretty basic, you didn't really have to be a doctor. I mean, it's very hard today to write a credible medical thriller without some kind of medical background or someone you can tap to do that. Jesse Kellerman's second book, for example, Jonathan and Faye Kellerman's son, is kind of a hospital mystery, but his wife is just finishing her internship, or just finished it in New York, so he had like an in-house consultant. And then you get people like Robin Cook, who was a doctor, or Tess Gerritsen, who was a physician, writing those. And I think it would be very hard to write a credible thriller based on today's medical knowledge without...
Well, maybe that's one good reason I stick to historical fiction.
Yeah, but I meant that the level of knowledge that your characters have is possibly analogous to that of a junior high school student today in terms of medicine.
Yeah, in many ways. And I think they'd fail every exam they took. But no, I mean, it's obviously a very, very different world. But for me, I had the same sort of slight access to. I had friends who were doctors, and they would take me into mortuaries and sort of show me how sort of basic rules of dissection, which hadn't changed that much. One thing people were good at in the 18th century was they did know how to dissect. They practiced all day long on pigs, which supposedly have remarkably similar intestines to humans. So at least I got that part right.
I noticed in a review of the book, which I printed out since I didn't think I could memorize it quite fast enough, they called you a modern-day Poe. Do you have any idea what that derived from?
I think probably just sort of a gloomy, shadowy worlds of suspense and historicism. I'm not sure. Well, it's always very flattering. We'll take it.
Well, it goes on to say, a modern-day Poe, Griffin, that's you, paints a thrilling, ghoulish picture of late 17th and 18th century London. In this winning historical novel, young Dr. Joseph Bendix is studying in Paris after he's ruined by a French coquette. What fun. He returns to his native city in terms of, in search of a mentor to help him gain wealth and respect, and then he apprentices to the veteran surgeon and goes on. But I thought that was an interesting start to the review, and I had wondered if the reviewer found what you wrote ghoulish, because I certainly didn't. I thought it was actually relatively, what's the word I want? Not academic, objective. I mean, I thought you dealt very well with what was actually happening at the time.
Yeah, I don't think I was trying to be ghoulish.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean, it came as a surprise. Well, maybe so, but I did think that it was when I read this, I just thought it was an interesting take, because I didn't think that that it was a ghoulish book. I thought it was just true to what was happening at the time.
Well, you read my intentions correctly, but I'm very if ghoulish and Poe go together, I'll take it every day.
All right. And there was an earlier review, which I forgot to mention. We were talking about Rick William Sharp. They called you a born writer, so apparently they didn't know about the Arizona book. Was helping his father with some genealogical research when he came across a pirate hanging from the family tree, and then you became obsessed with the golden age of piracy. And then they talked about it as an astonishing literary debut, the gripping story of William Williams, a young man impressed into service on a pirate ship as the captain's biographer, which I kind of like. And that's a Patrick O'Brian thing in a way, isn't it? Because the doctor not only kept his own notes, but kind of kept a record of the voyage and of the captain's life in the Aubrey Maturin series.
Yeah,